She didn't call her mother. She didn't call her sister. She didn't call anyone who would have asked questions she couldn't answer. For 7 nights, Darlene Wiggs parked her 2008 Nissan Altima in the far corner of a Big Lots parking lot on Central Avenue in Charlotte, North Carolina, and told her children they were car camping. On the 8th morning, a hospital security guard she had worked beside for 2 years found her sleeping upright in the driver's seat. It wasn't because she'd done anything wrong. It was because he knew what fogged windows mean. Darlene was 36 years old. She worked as a certified nursing assistant on Unit 4 at Mercy Cross Medical Center in Charlotte, 5 days a week, 6:15 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. She earned $15.10 an hour, no benefits, no paid sick leave she could actually afford to use. She had been doing this work for 6 years. Her patient satisfaction scores were in the top 12% of the department. She had never once been late. She had 3 children. Jordan was 11. He was the kind of boy who watched before he spoke, who noticed things other children his age didn't bother to notice. Like when his mother stopped eating dinner and said she wasn't hungry, or when she checked her phone with a particular stillness that meant something was wrong with the numbers. Jordan had learned early that silence was a form of protection. He used it the way other kids used noise. Amelia was 7. She talked constantly. When she wasn't talking, she was singing, not performing, just filling the air with sounds the way some children fidget. Her teachers called it a gift. Darlene knew it was something else too. Amelia filled silence, because silence made her anxious. She had learned that, somewhere along the way, without anyone teaching her. Darius was 22 months. He laughed at ceiling fans. He cried hard and forgave in 30 seconds. He had no idea what was happening around him, and Darlene intended to keep it that way for as long as she possibly could. Their father, Brandon, had left 8 months ago. Not for another woman. Not because of anything dramatic. He left because he said the weight of it was too much. The house that always needed something fixed. The bank account that never reached zero but never quite didn't. The feeling of standing still while the water rose. He said he needed time. He drove away on a Sunday morning and never came back. Darlene had not wasted energy being angry. Anger required time she didn't have. The landlord raised the rent on a Wednesday. Not by a little. By $430 a month, effective in 30 days. He was within his rights. Charlotte had no rent control. The building had sold twice in 4 years, and the new owner wanted the numbers to pencil. Darlene called every 2-bedroom listing in the county that week. First month, last month, security deposit. The minimum was $3,200. She had $287 in her checking account and had already borrowed from everyone who had anything to lend. On the last afternoon of the month, she packed what fit into the Altima. The back seats went down. A comforter from the linen closet, 3 backpacks, a bag of snacks from the Dollar Tree on Eastway Drive, juice pouches, peanut butter crackers, baby wipes, 1 change of clothes for each child, Darius's formula. That was the inventory. She told the children they were doing something fun, car camping, like the videos on YouTube. Amelia asked if they could roast marshmallows. Darlene said maybe tomorrow. She drove to the Big Lots on Central Avenue and parked in the far corner, away from the entrance lights, but close enough to the main road that she wouldn't feel completely alone. She turned off the engine. She spread the comforter across the folded seats. She tucked Amelia and Darius together at the back and handed Amelia a juice pouch and told her a story about a bear who ran a bakery and kept getting the recipes wrong. Darius was asleep before the bear burned his second batch of biscuits. Amelia lasted until the part where the bear's oven caught fire. Then she was out. Jordan didn't sleep yet. He sat in the passenger seat for a long time, looking out the window at nothing. Then he turned to her. "Mom." "Yeah, baby." A pause, his face careful. "This is a good spot," he said. "Good and quiet." He knew. She knew he knew. Neither of them said it out loud. Night 1 ended with Darlene watching the parking lot lights and telling herself, "One night, just one. We'll figure it out tomorrow." The second night was colder. The temperature dropped to 41 degrees, and the cold came in through the floor first, then through the doors, then through everything. At 1 in the morning, Darius woke up crying. Not the small fussy crying, but the deep kind. The kind that meant something in his small body, was uncomfortable, and had been for a while. Darlene took off her jacket, a thin quilted thing she'd bought at Goodwill 2 winters ago, and wrapped it around him until he stopped shaking. He went back to sleep with his face pressed against the sleeve. Darlene sat in the driver's seat in her long-sleeve scrub top with her arms crossed over her chest and shivered quietly until the sky turned gray and the birds started. She did not take the jacket back. Her jaw ached by morning. When Amelia woke up and asked when they were going home, Darlene said soon. She said it the way she always said it. Steady, practiced, the voice she used on the floor at Mercy Cross when a patient was afraid. The voice that meant everything is fine, even when nothing is fine. The third night, the system cracked. A security guard from the shopping center found her at 11:45. He wasn't unkind about it. He stood outside the window with his flashlight angled low and his voice quiet, and told her she needed to move along. It was store policy. He was sorry. Darlene looked at the back seat where Amelia had just settled and Darius was sleeping on his stomach, and she said, "Please, quietly, just until morning, we won't be any trouble." The guard looked at the children. Something shifted in his face, but the answer was the same. "I'm sorry, ma'am." She started the engine. She drove through Charlotte at midnight past gas stations with their lights still on and intersections that blinked yellow because nobody was coming. She found a church parking lot on Albemarle Road with a sign out front that read, "All are welcome." She hoped that applied to a woman with 3 children and nowhere else to be. She parked, checked the mirrors, checked the locks, checked her children. A small voice from the passenger seat. Jordan was awake. Of course he was. He'd been awake the whole time. He'd watched the security guard, watched her find the new lot, watched without saying a word, the way he always watched. "It's okay, Mom," he said. "I'm not scared." Those 4 words hit Darlene somewhere below the ribs, because he shouldn't have to say that. An 11-year-old boy in a church parking lot at midnight should not have to reassure his mother that he is not afraid. The fact that he said it, the fact that he knew to say it, meant the camping story had already broken open in ways she hadn't seen yet. She put her hand on his head, her palm against his hair, and held it there until his breathing slowed, and he finally let himself go to sleep. 3 nights. She was still showing up to work every morning at 6:15. Still changing linens, turning patients, spooning food into mouths, and speaking softly to people who'd forgotten what their own voices sounded like. She still smiled. Nobody on Unit 4 knew. During the days, she dropped the children at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library branch on North Tryon at 9 o'clock. She gave Jordan the backpack with the snacks and the wipes. She gave him her phone number written on an index card, even though he had it memorized. Because holding something real felt safer than trusting memory when you are 11 years old and responsible for a 7-year-old and a baby. She told him to stay in the children's section. She said she'd be back by 3:30. Jordan nodded. He took Amelia's hand in one of his and Darius's stroller handle in the other and walked inside like someone walking into a job he didn't choose but couldn't put down. Darlene drove to Mercy Cross and worked her full shift. On the 5th night, she had $9 until payday. $9 and a gas gauge sitting below the quarter tank line. She pulled into a BP station on Sugar Creek Road and sat in front of the pump for 6 minutes, running the only calculation that mattered. $9 in gas would get her to work and back for 2 days. $9 in diapers and formula would keep Dries fed and dry for 3 days. There was no version of this equation where everything got covered. There never was. She bought the diapers. That night, Amelia had a headache. She didn't complain. She was 7. She knew something was wrong with complaining, but she pressed the back of her hand against her own forehead, the way she'd seen Darlene do, and said her brain felt squeezed. Darlene had no Tylenol. She had used the last of it 4 days ago. She wet a baby wipe under some water from a gas station bathroom and held it against Amelia's forehead and sang softly until Amelia's face relaxed and her eyes finally closed. Darlene did not sleep. Night 6. The interior light had been left on when Jordan got Darius's diaper bag from the back. It was the kind of thing that happened when you lived in a car, small accidents with large consequences. When Darlene turned the key at 10:45, the engine clicked once and went quiet. She sat for a moment. Then she got out, went to the back, and began to push. She heard the passenger door open. Footsteps on asphalt, then small hands pressed against the trunk beside hers. Jordan, not saying anything, not asking, just there, pushing. They moved the car 200 yards down Albemarle Road to the church lot in silence, her palms flat against the cold trunk lid, his hands beside hers, their breath coming out in small white clouds in the dark. Neither of them spoke about it afterward. Some things don't need words, some things are too heavy for them. Night 7. The last night before everything changed. Darlene sat in the driver's seat after the children fell asleep and made phone calls. The first shelter said the wait list was 4 months. The second said 6 to 8 weeks. The third asked if she had a safe place to sleep tonight. She said yes, because saying no meant the call could go somewhere she couldn't follow. She hung up. She called her sister in Greensboro. Her sister answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Darlene told her. She said it quietly, like something she'd been keeping inside for a week and was finally ready to set down. Liddy, I'm sleeping in my car with the kids. I don't know what else to do. Her sister's silence was not cold. It was the silence of someone who cared and couldn't. She had a 1-bedroom apartment. She was 2 months behind on her own rent. She said, I love you and I would if I could, and I'm so sorry, Dee. I'm so sorry. Darlene said she understood, because she did. She hung up. The car was quiet, except for Darius breathing in the back, and Amelia making a small sound in her sleep, the sound she always made when a dream was happening. Darlene cried, not out loud. She couldn't cry out loud. If she made sound, Jordan would wake up, so she cried through her breathing instead. Long, slow, controlled breaths, each one carrying the weight of 7 nights. Her chest shook. Her hands stayed flat on the steering wheel. She cried for 9 minutes, then stopped, wiped her face, checked the mirrors, checked the locks, checked her children. Still safe, still asleep. She didn't know that in 12 hours, someone who had been watching from a distance for 2 years was about to stop watching. Earl Kimmons was 64 years old. He had worked security at Mercy Cross Medical Center for 9 years. Before that, he'd spent 20 years in the Army. Military police, 2 tours in Germany, 1 in Kuwait, and before that he had been a plumber's apprentice in Rock Hill, South Carolina, until the plumbing business he'd eventually bought dissolved in 2009 and took everything with it. He spent 14 months after that living in his truck behind an AutoZone on Sunset Boulevard in Rock Hill. He knew what fogged windows looked like from the inside. He knew what they meant. He'd seen Darlene's face every morning for 2 years. She always came in early, always had her badge already out, always said good morning by name to whichever guard was at the desk. He didn't know much about her life outside those doors. He hadn't needed to. On the 8th morning, he was doing his 6 a.m. walkthrough of the lower parking deck when he saw the Nissan Altima parked in the far corner near the utility door. The windows were fogged. Not a little. Fully, evenly, the kind of fog that only forms when people have been breathing inside a closed car for hours. He had made that kind of fog himself for 14 months, in a truck that smelled like pipe cement and old fast food and his own particular failure. He stopped. He looked at the car for a moment. Then he walked back to the entrance and checked the morning sheet. Darlene Wiggs. Unit 4, morning shift, starting at 6:15. He went back downstairs to the lower deck. At 6:12, she came through the stairwell door with her badge already out and her eyes already doing the thing they always did. Scanning the space ahead, measuring the distance between where she was and where she needed to be. She was wearing clean scrubs, her hair pulled back, and she was moving like a person who had somewhere to be and intended to get there on time. Earl stepped out of the shadow beside the door. "Darlene." She stopped. He wasn't holding a flashlight. He wasn't blocking her path. He was just standing there, a large, quiet man with gray at his temples and the careful posture of someone who knew how to make himself unthreatening. "How long have you been parking down here?" he asked. She looked at him. Her face went through three things in quick succession: fear, calculation, and then the particular exhaustion of someone who has been pretending for too long and has finally run out of the energy to keep doing it. "My kids are in the car," she said. "They're fine. I'm going to figure it out." Earl nodded. "I know you are," he said. "I'm not asking because of that." He paused. "I'm asking because I lived in a truck for 14 months after my business went under, and I know what it costs to do what you're doing, and I think somebody should know." Darlene looked at him. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't threatening anything. He was just standing there, telling her the truth about himself so she would know he wasn't a stranger to this. That was all. She looked down at her badge. Then she said quietly, 7 nights. Earl nodded. He said he would make sure her kids were warm in the car until she finished her shift. He had a space heater in the security office. He said he'd check on them every hour. Then he said there was someone she should talk to. He didn't say more than that. Amos Whitfield was 57 years old. He was the vice president of operations at Mercy Cross Health System, which meant he oversaw facilities, staffing structures, and the operational budget for 4 hospitals across the greater Charlotte region. He had a corner office on the 7th floor with a window that looked south toward Uptown. His name appeared in the Charlotte Business Journal with some regularity. His signature on a policy document could change the working conditions of 4,000 employees. He had grown up in Bessemer, Alabama, in a house that tilted slightly to the left and had 1 bathroom for 6 people and a kitchen where the overhead light flickered whenever the refrigerator kicked on. His mother, Cynthia, was a home health aide for 31 years. She drove to other people's houses and bathed them and dressed them and sat with them so their families didn't have to. She earned $11.40 an hour for most of her career. She never once called in sick. She told Amos, when he was 9 years old, that the secret was to be the kind of person who showed up regardless. Everything else, she said, would sort itself out eventually. He had built his entire career on the memory of her hands. Every policy he wrote, every budget he approved, every system he rebuilt, it was laid over that memory like concrete over a crack. He'd pulled himself out. He'd gotten his mother out. He'd done everything right. 2 years ago, his daughter Nia had died on Interstate 485 when a delivery truck drifted into her lane at 5:40 in the morning. She was 27. She had been a traveling nurse. Cardiac unit, then pediatric oncology, then wherever they needed someone who wouldn't burn out from caring too much. She was the kind of person who left snack bags in her co-workers' lockers with handwritten notes that said things like, "I noticed you've been here late all week. Eat something." Nobody knew she did it until after she died, when the staff on her last unit found her journal. She had been doing it since nursing school. She noticed people. That was her particular gift and her particular purpose. She noticed the ones everybody else walked past. Amos had honored her memory the right way. He established a nursing scholarship in her name. He endowed a wellness fund at Mercy Cross. He signed the checks and attended the dedications and shook the hands. He had never, not once, sat down with a single person who benefited from any of it. Because doing that meant sitting across from someone who reminded him of Naya, and that was the one thing he had decided he could not survive. Earl Kimmons had coffee with Amos in the break room on Thursday mornings. It had been a habit for 6 years, since Amos had come down to the ground floor to investigate a facilities complaint, and found Earl doing a crossword puzzle in the security office and asked what he had for 7 across. They didn't talk much, usually. They didn't need to. On Thursday morning, Earl set down his coffee and said, "One of the CNAs on Unit 4 has been sleeping in her car in the lower deck. Week and a half. She's got 3 kids with her." Amos's hand stopped on his cup. "She's still coming in on time?" he asked. "Every morning," Earl said. "Never missed a day in 6 years." Amos put his cup down and went upstairs. He pulled her file himself. 6 years of evaluations, all in the top tier. 3 emergency loan applications in the past 14 months, all denied under a policy that had been written in 2014 and never revisited. Patient comments in her file. "She talks to you like you're a person, not a chart. She remembered my dog's name." He sat with the file for a while. Then he went down to the cafeteria. He found her at 12:15, at the table near the south window, eating a sandwich she'd clearly brought from home and reading something on her phone. He set 2 coffees on the table and sat across from her without introduction, because introducing himself would change the shape of the conversation before it had a chance to become real. She looked up. "My mother worked 30 years as a home health aide in Alabama," he said. "She never asked anyone for a thing. She would rather go without than admit she needed something. I spent most of my life thinking that was strength." He paused. "I've been reconsidering." Darlene looked at him. Whatever she had expected during her lunch break, it was not this. "Who are you?" she asked. He told her. Her face shifted. Not fear, not deference, just a woman recalibrating. She started to say something about the car, something beginning with an explanation, and he stopped her. "I'm not here about the car," he said. "I'm here because I read your file. 6 years, no incidents, top evaluations, 3 loan requests denied by a policy I didn't know we still had. I should have known." He moved one of the coffees across the table toward her. "I'd like to hear what happened, if you're willing to tell me." Darlene looked at the coffee. Then she looked at him. The look of a woman deciding how much truth to hand to a stranger, measuring it against how much she had left to lose. She told him everything. The rent increase, the $287, the phone calls that all ended in wait list, the 7 nights, the library, the milk or diapers decision, the dead battery, Jordan pushing the car in the dark. She told it in the flat, ordered way that nurses tell things. Chronologically, without self-pity, just the facts arranged in the sequence they happened. When she finished, she said, "You want to know what's strange? I did everything right. I went to work. I paid my bills. I never once." She stopped. She looked out the window. "You start thinking it must be something you did, some calculation you got wrong. Even when you know that's not true, you still think it." Amos looked at her. "He didn't say it's not your fault. He didn't say you did your best. Those were the things people said to feel better about someone else's pain." He said, "My mother told me the same thing." Almost word for word. She said the hardest part of needing help wasn't not having it. It was the way it made her feel like she'd failed some test she didn't know she was taking. Something passed between them. Not gratitude. Not the uncomfortable gap between someone who has and someone who doesn't. Something more like recognition. 2 people who had grown up watching the same thing from different angles. Amos set down his coffee. "I want to offer you something," he said, "and I want to be clear about what it is and what it isn't. It's not charity. It's not pity. It's a floor, a place to stand while you build." He told her. 60 days in transitional housing the health system owned and had kept half occupied because no one had made it a priority to fill it. An accelerated LPN program through Central Piedmont Community College, fully covered, with the hospital covering tuition in exchange for a 2-year commitment after she certified, and a pay adjustment effective the following Monday to $18.50 an hour during training. LPNs at Mercy Cross started at $26.10 with full benefits for the employee and dependents. 60 days, he said, to get your footing. What you do after that is yours. Darlene stared at him. Her hands were flat on the table. She didn't reach for the coffee. "Why?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Because my daughter would have found you before Earl did," he said. She would have left snacks at your locker and a note that said, "I see you." She would have sat right here and said exactly what I'm trying to say. He stopped. She's not here to do it, so I'm doing it the only way I know how. Darlene's eyes filled. She didn't turn away, she let it happen. My kids come first, she said, and her voice barely held. Whatever this is, whatever happens next, they come first. They always come first. I know, Amos said. That's why I'm here. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building called Eastfield Commons on Albemarle Road, 4 blocks from the church parking lot where Darlene had spent 5 of the 7 nights. 2 bedrooms, thin carpet, a kitchen with a stove that lit on the first try, and a refrigerator that hummed and cabinets that were empty but ready. Darlene carried Darius in first. He was awake, his head swiveling, taking in the ceiling, the walls, the light fixture. She set him down on the living room floor. He toddled 3 steps, sat down hard, looked around, and said, "Oh!" with the deep satisfaction of a small person encountering something new. Amelia walked in and immediately started checking every room. She opened the bathroom door and stopped. "Mama." Her voice was reverent. "There's a bathtub." She had not had a bathtub in 11 days. She stood in the doorway looking at it the way you look at something you weren't sure still existed. Jordan came in last. He set his backpack by the door. He walked through the living room, into the kitchen, and then he stood in the doorway of the smaller bedroom for a long time without going in. It was an empty room, a window, a closet, beige carpet, nothing in it. But it was his. "Is this mine?" he asked, not turning around. "Yours," Darlene said. He walked inside. He put his hand flat on the wall, pressed his palm against it as if checking whether it was real. Then he pushed the door closed, not a slam, a careful, deliberate close, the sound of someone making a private decision. Darlene heard him crying through the door. Soft, quiet, the way Jordan always cried when he allowed himself to. She put her hand on the doorknob. Then she took it off. She stepped back. She let him have it. The first room he had ever closed a door in and known that nobody would come in unless he said so. The first space that was entirely, completely his. She stood in the hallway with her hand over her mouth and let her son cry alone for the first time because he had earned a door that closed, because 11-year-olds should not have to be brave every minute of every day. Darlene started the LPN program at Central Piedmont 3 weeks later. Classes 4 evenings a week. She still worked her CNA shift mornings. She still came home, made dinner, helped Amelia with her spelling words, gave Darius his bath, read them both a story. Then she studied. At the kitchen table, after they were asleep, with a cup of coffee that went cold while she memorized drug interaction charts and practiced reading vital sign patterns and learned the things that stood between $15.10 an hour and $26. She made flashcards by hand. She fell asleep twice in the first week with her forehead on the textbook and her pen still in her hand. Both times she woke up with a dish towel laid gently over her shoulders. Jordan. Of course it was Jordan. Amos visited once during the 60 days. He brought a picture book about a girl who builds a house from scratch for Amelia, a set of stacking rings for Darius, and a bookstore gift card for Jordan, because Jordan was the kind of kid who should pick his own books. Amelia showed him around the apartment with the energy of someone giving a very important tour. "This is our kitchen. This is where Mama studies. This is my room. I share it with Darius, but he doesn't take up much space." Before Amos left, Jordan came out of his room and handed him a folded piece of paper. Amos opened it. It was a drawing in pencil, a hospital building, blocky and careful, with a stick figure standing at the entrance. At the bottom, in Jordan's handwriting, "This is where things got better." Amos folded it and put it in his coat pocket. He said thank you. He walked to his car, sat in the driver's seat, and did not start the engine for a long time. He was not crying for Darlene. He was crying for Nia, for all the locker notes she'd left that he only found out about after she was gone. For 2 years of signing checks and approving budgets and keeping himself at a clean, careful distance from every single person those checks were meant to help. For the part of himself that had called that distance strength, when it was nothing more than avoidance, dressed up inefficiency. He told his driver to take him back to Mercy Cross. On the 3rd floor, near the nurses' station on Unit 7, the staff had put up a small framed plaque on the wall beside the supply room. He had paid for the frame, he had approved the text, he had never stood in front of it. He stood in front of it now, in memory of Nia Whitfield, who always noticed. He stood there for a long time. The floor was busy around him. Shift change, nurses moving past with tablet carts, a patient being wheeled toward radiology. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked. He was just a man in a hallway, looking at a plaque with his daughter's name on it. He didn't talk to the photograph the way people do in movies. He just stood there and let himself be in the same space as her name, and that was enough. That was more than he had allowed himself in 2 years. On the way out, he passed the pediatric wing and heard a child laughing at something. The high, uncomplicated laughter of a kid who found something funny and didn't need it to mean anything else. He stopped walking for a moment. Then he kept going. 8 weeks into the program, Darlene was walking to her car in the hospital visitor lot after her clinical rotation when she saw the Jeep Cherokee parked at the far end near the drainage fence. The windows were fogged, not lightly, completely, evenly, the kind of fog she knew from the inside. She stopped. She stood there for a moment, looking at the car. Then she walked over and sat down on the curb beside the driver's door, not standing above it, beside it. The window cracked 2 inches. A woman's face appeared, young, maybe 29, 30, wearing the gray uniform top of the hospital dietary staff. Her eyes were red and exhausted and immediately defensive. "I'm not bothering anyone," the woman said. "I know," Darlene said. "I'm not here about that." She looked at the window fog. "How long?" The woman didn't answer. "My name is Darlene. I work upstairs on Unit 4. 9 weeks ago, I was parked 1 level down from here. Same situation, 2 kids and a baby." She paused. "I'm not going to report you. I'm asking because I want to know if you've eaten today." The window came down another inch. The woman's name was Felicia Torrance. She had 2 children, 4 and 6. She'd been in the visitor lot for 5 nights. She'd been eating from the employee cafeteria on her breaks, pocketing extra bread rolls when she could do it without anyone seeing. She had $41 until Friday. Darlene listened to all of it. She didn't offer solutions while Felicia was still talking. She just sat on the curb in her scrubs with her back against the car door and listened, the way she'd learned to listen on Unit 4, the way you listen when someone is telling you something that costs them to say. When Felicia finished, Darlene said, "There are 3 things I'm going to tell you, and I need you to write them down because I wrote them down once, and it was the difference." She gave her Earl Kimmons' name and extension. She gave her the HR number for the Employee Emergency Housing Program that now existed because Amos Whitfield had rewritten a policy that should have been rewritten years ago. And she gave her her own number, written on the back of a clinical rotation schedule she pulled from her bag. "Call Earl first," she said. "Tell him Darlene sent you. He'll know what it means." Felicia took the paper with both hands. Her fingers were cold. "Why are you doing this?" she said. Darlene looked at the fogged windows. She thought about Earl stepping out of a shadow and saying, "I lived in a truck for 14 months, and I'm not here to judge you, just to tell somebody." She thought about Amos setting a coffee cup in front of her and talking about his mother's hands before he ever mentioned what he could offer. "Because somebody sat down next to my car when I needed it," she said. "Not to fix anything, just to sit. That's all this is." 1 year later, Darlene Wiggs was an LPN at Mercy Cross Medical Center, $26.40 an hour, full medical and dental and vision for herself and 3 dependents. Day shift, 7 to 3:30. Home before the kids came back from school. For the first time in 6 years, she went to the dentist without calculating whether she could afford the copay. She had signed her own lease on the second month after her pay increase, her name on the mailbox, her name on the utility account. She paid both herself. Jordan made the middle school chess team. His coach said he played like someone who had spent his whole life learning to think 3 moves ahead. The coach meant it as a compliment. He didn't know how right he was. Amelia entered the school art contest. The theme was Places That Matter. She spent 2 weeks on a painting of a parking garage, beige concrete pillars, a low ceiling, 1 strip of fluorescent light, with a sky painted on the ceiling above the car, full of stars and a half moon. She titled it, Our Best Camping Spot. She got honorable mention. The ribbon hung on the refrigerator, next to a birthday drawing she'd made for Amos at some point, which Amos had never asked for, and which Darlene suspected would stay on the refrigerator for a very long time. Darius, now 2.5, had developed a habit of making announcements. He would look up from whatever he was doing at random moments and say, with great authority, "We home." Not "we are home," just "we home." The way people say something when they know it is true and it matters, and that's all it needs. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, Darlene drove to work the way she always did, taking Central Avenue because she had started taking it on purpose. She passed the old big lots. The parking lot was empty in the early morning light, still and gray and ordinary, nothing in it that would mean anything to anyone who hadn't spent a night there, counting how much heat was left in the engine. She slowed down. In the far corner of the lot, a car sat alone, a Honda CR-V, older windows fogged from the inside, the full even fog of hours of breathing in a closed space. Darlene pulled over. She turned off the engine. She sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel, looking at the car. She thought about Earl saying "how long" instead of "you need to move." She thought about Amos setting down a coffee cup without introducing himself first. She thought about Jordan's small hands pressing against the trunk of the Altima on a dark road, saying nothing, just pushing. She thought about Felicia Torrance, who had called Earl Kimmons the next morning, and who had, 3 weeks later, moved into Eastfield Commons 2 floors below, where Darlene used to live. Kindness doesn't stay where it lands. It looks for the next window. Darlene opened the car door. She walked across the empty parking lot in her scrubs, her badge clipped to her chest, her shoes quiet on the asphalt. She reached the CR-V. She stood beside the driver's side window. She raised her hand. She knocked. Gently, twice, the way you knock on a door you are not sure you should be opening, but know that you should. And she waited.